Okay, today on the podcast, I'm joined by Ron Sylvester. Ron is the managing editor of news at Community Journalism Lab in Spokane, Washington. And Ron, thank you for joining me. Looking
Well, Paul,
forward to
thanks.
learning about this. Yeah.
Yeah, Paul, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's an exciting time in Spokane for local news.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I've been reading about it a bit, so it's good to talk to somebody on the ground. If you wouldn't mind, just set the baseline a little bit. Just tell us a little bit about your background, your career, so we can
Yeah,
understand where you're
so
coming from.
so I took my first journalism job when I was 17 years old in
Wow.
Springfield, Missouri, working for a Gannett paper, and started out as a sports writer, which led to me actually being able to go up and work at USA Today in the first few years that they started in the early 80s. And from there, I moved to, I came back to my hometown. I really liked the community feel of a local newspaper. You know, when you were working for USA Today, you never went into a coffee shop and people are talking about your story that morning, because it was more of a national audience. And so went back, then I went to the Wichita Eagle, moved to Wichita, Kansas, which is in Kansas. It's where I met Rob Curley, and because he was in Lawrence. And about 2008, I started doing this thing. Twitter had just come out, and I was covering courts and legal affairs. And so the prompt back then was, "What are you doing?" I don't know if you remember this from Twitter, but it was, "What are you doing?" And what I was doing was I was covering murder trials. And so one day I just started, okay, this is what I'm doing. I'm covering a murder trial. And I just started putting short tweets out there of the trial. And yeah, it caught on. My wife said I became really famous in a really small corner of the world, at that time. But that caught on. And now live tweeting trials is kind of the standard. But when I started doing that, it caught Rob's attention. He was up in Lawrence, Kansas, and had just been in the New York Times under the headline Newspaper of the Future. So he was really interested in people doing innovative things. So we started talking, and eventually went to work for him at the Las Vegas Sun. And then at the Orange County Register, where we opened an office in Los Angeles, and I ran that. And then I ended the first part of my career. I went back and was the editor for the newspaper in Hutchinson, Kansas, the Hutchinson News, which was a Pulitzer-winning newspaper, and did that for 3 years. It was a small town newspaper, family owned. It was like my dream job, and then the family turned around, sold it to what was then Gatehouse, and now Gannett, and they came in and fired everybody, including me. I wasn't ready to quit working yet, so I found a job. Spent the last 6 years as a magistrate judge in
Hmm.
Kansas, and then I had retired, and my LinkedIn profile picture was me in a hammock with a martini. And then Rob called, and over the last 10 years, Rob had been sending me information and drafts and things. I've got this idea that I really hope works. And so he called me, and I said, "I'm retired." And then he kept sending me stuff about what they were doing, information. And I always say, Rob Curley and I have tried to save journalism before, and you see the state of journalism. So we failed on that part, but we learned along the way all our mistakes. And when he sent me this for the Community Journalism Lab, then I looked it over, and I looked it over pretty carefully, and I said, "Holy crap, this might work." And so, yeah, I want to come and help you on this, because it's really exciting, and I really do think this could be the model for local news.
Awesome. That's what this show is all about. And well, what was that holy crap moment? Can you tell me about what it was and what Community Journalism Lab is?
Yeah.
For anybody who's not aware, yeah.
So, it's a 501(c)(3), not for profit. And there are other not-for-profit newspapers and journalism, but we are different because we use a hybrid model. But and the hybrid model is using subscription. is the main driver, and we've got some strategies that we can talk about later about increasing our subscription rate. And then, of course, we're able to get grants and the usual thing, and then philanthropy. Also, there's some advertising still involved in that, and we can do deeper dives into that. But basically, it's that three-pronged thing with philanthropy, subscriptions, and advertising. And like I said, filling in with some grants and things like that. But the thing that convinced me is because over the years, we've all worked for newspaper owners who maybe weren't the best stewards of money. When I was visiting California one time, we were up in Central California, and we went to the Hearst Castle.
Hmm. Yeah, I've
And I
seen
walked
that.
around this an opulent place, built by William Randolph Hearst, and I was walking around looking at all the gold stuff, and I said, "Yeah, this guy didn't play his reporter's crap either." But so we, um, so the key to that, and because as news people, we were always at the mercy of the money people and what they wanted to spend money on, or what they when they started cutting things, cutting the newsroom first. And the thing that got me into this was we control the money on this. The newsroom people are actually running it, and we're getting a really robust and variety of people donating to comma, and we are talking literally from people giving $5 to people giving $500,000. And then some of the leading businesses in town, some of whom never advertised in the Spokesman-Review, are giving, upwards to $1 million to these, to our cause. And then, of course, on the other side of ownership, the Coles, who have owned this newspaper for more than 100 years, are donating the Spokesman-Review to comma, and thereby it becomes one of the first community-owned newspapers in the country.
And help clarify it for me a little bit, because when I first reached out to you, I saw you were working at Comma, and I just kind of went and looked through Comma, and I'm like, this is a really cool idea. And then when I was kind of putting these questions together for you, like I know it's heavily tied to the Spokesman-Review, which I'd been reading, like we talked about before, was do it with like the family ownership was passing it along to the nonprofit and everything. So is it just for the Spokesman-Review? Do you have like other publications you're working with? Is it kind of like
Yes.
okay? Sorry, I
Yes.
wasn't quite clear on that. Sorry, I didn't.
Okay,
Yeah,
so the Spokesman-Review, of course, that's our flagship
right.
publication.
Okay.
But during this time that we were setting this up, and the real impetus and the first publication that we had is a publication called The Black Lens. It's a newspaper for the African American community. And Rob was really close friends with the founder, and Rob just said, we can't lose this in our
Mm.
community. And so he was invited to speak at Sandy's funeral. And he said, all I had was, because they'd invited him, and they said, no, we don't have anybody to speak about her journalism career. And Rob said, I didn't have anything to say, so I just got up and kind of recited a business plan that I'd been working on. And afterwards, one of the board members of the Black Lens came up and said, do you really have a business plan? And Rob shared it with him, and he said, yeah, this needs to be written by an adult, but this is a great plan. And so they threw their support behind us. And so the Black Lens was actually our first allied publication. And then, of course, the donation of the Spokesman-Review. Now, so as managing editor of news, one of my jobs is also to be the editor of what we call our allied newsroom. And so that is going to include restarting up to 3 area weeklies, rural weeklies that have been out of print for a long time. We're going to restart those. And we have experience doing that because we did that at the Orange County Register with the weekly community newspapers around Orange County. And some of them we restarted, some of them we just kept going and made more robust. So we're going to restart some weekly newspapers. And we're also we have partnerships with the public schools and 5 universities in this area in Eastern Washington and Northern Idaho. And we're going to, of course, the high schools stopped 10 years ago publishing high school newspapers. And I call everything, Paul, I call everything a newspaper, whether it's
Right. Yeah.
digital or not, much like I'm old and I still call collection of recorded songs an album. But so I call everything. But we're going to restart high school news publications at all the high schools, and that balance off. We are the only newspaper in the country, and we've been doing this for several years, that has a paid high school internship. And at the end, they all get a shirt with the Spokesman-Review that says, "My summer job was cooler than yours." But but we're going to have high school journalists that are paid. Rob says, we are creating NIL for nerds, and they're going to be a part of our newsroom, and they're going to work with professionals and learn how to do everything, and as well as the colleges, none of whom have journalism degrees, but they have journalism courses. So, and I can get into this as much as you want and talk for an hour, but also with the colleges and high schools, we're also working with them to develop media literacy programs, civics programs for all the students to teach the next generation on how to find reliable information, how to spot information that's not reliable,
Hmm.
and really all about media literacy.
That's really cool. The media literacy part is definitely cool because that's what happens when local quality information, news and information goes away. I also like what you guys are doing with high schools because just a trend. I don't come from a journalism background. I work with journalists. I talk to a lot of them, but a lot of the people, almost 100 people that have been on this show, fall into usually two categories. Either they were in some completely unrelated field and fell backwards into a journalism job and like stayed there, or they caught the bug really early. Like you said, you were 17 or something like that, and they caught the bug working at a paper in their high school or something like that. So that's really, I like it when I see programs like that, getting people interested in it early on and, finding smart young people that want to carry the torch, I guess you could say.
Well,
Um,
yeah, we all, both Rob and I, we both started in journalism when we were in high school.
mhm.
When I was in high school, that was during the Watergate years. And of course, journalists were heroes
Right.
at that time because that shortly followed the whole Pentagon Papers thing. So, journalists were held in real high esteem, and that was one way that you could so-called change the world. And so, and Rob got into it really young too. So we both have kind of that in common, and we want to pass that along to future generations. So so that's really important to us.
Awesome. The next question I had sent you was focused on the Spokesman-Review, but after having you explain it to me a little bit, I'll kind of broaden it to all of Community Journalism Lab. Can you talk a bit about kind of the hybrid model that you guys are working on? Can you dive into the mechanics, the business model a little bit more? Because you said it's ad supported and it's a nonprofit, so it can take donors. I'm blanking on the word, but could you just talk about that a little bit? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on this hybrid model, it's driven by subscriptions. And one of the deals, so we've got these memorandums of understanding with the school system and the universities, and they've all agreed to this. And part of that is that every high school, middle school, every college student at one of these universities will get a free digital subscription to the
Hmm.
Spokesman Review,
Cool.
which is operating behind a paywall, but they'll get a subscription. Now, it's free to them. It's not free. The schools are actually paying for through their gifts and donations and their support are actually paying for these subscriptions. So that's going to really raise our subscription rate right there. And we're putting things in, um, we've got Sean Stoops, who's a great uh, tech guy who we worked with in um, everywhere since Las Vegas, and he's setting up a pretty robust website that will um, read where people are. It's kind of like a local Google
Hmm.
for local businesses. So if you're in high school and you log into the Spokesman-Review, it'll give you deals on Zips Burgers, which is the local fast food things. And for somebody else, it might show them, it might know that they're looking for cars, so it might show them the cars that they're looking for. But this is all done locally. Uh, Rob did this before at the Las Vegas Sun, and I thought it was really cool, and nobody used it because this was in 2012, and people were kind of freaked out by it.
Right.
So didn't do it. So I always tell Rob, you're always about 10 years ahead of your time on most of these things. So that's the subscription. We have $14 million in subscriptions, which is more than a lot of larger newspapers like the Philadelphia Inquirer have. And that's going to just increase. The next thing that I think you'll really be interested in, Paul, is we're not giving up on print. So
I've sorry to interrupt. I've surprisingly heard that more and more on this
yeah.
show, but I'd like to hear more. What you're saying,
Yeah,
yeah.
so a few years ago, the Spokesman-Review stopped printing on Saturday, and it was to save money. But
Hmm.
what happened was it actually lost money because a bunch of people got mad and canceled their subscriptions, and through all kinds of attrition, it actually ended up losing money. First thing we're doing is we're putting back that Saturday paper, and one of the most interesting things about our leaning back into print is that we've figured out that just the analytics of it, the average print reader of the Spokesman-Review is 65 years old. We have a great area up here. People spend a lot of time hiking outdoors. There's a lot of great activity, snow skiing, snowshoeing. So it's a pretty healthy community. The average life expectancy is 85. Well, as people who work in this industry knows, print is still a big revenue driver.
Hmm.
So why would you want to give up that revenue for 25 years? This and and
That's a
and
good
this
point.
This gives us all 25 years to do one of two things: either develop just the most killer digital experience you can, and you can do that in 25 years, or also to lower the of the print subscribers, which we're hoping within the next couple of years will be 55 instead of 65. Um, I I uh, um, I like to kid around and say that I hope newspapers become the vinyl of information. Kids are now listening to vinyl records again because
Yep.
they realize they
Yeah.
sound better. And I think with all the research that's coming out on how the comprehension and you actually retain more information from a book or a printed product, maybe that will help too. But we're not giving up on print just simply because that's a revenue stream that is going to last at least 25 years. And so we're going to lean into it.
I like the framing of don't talk a lot about demographics on the show, but I like the framing of leaning into print for the older people that are subscribing to it, and then also really targeting the students and the younger kids and trying to get them interested in it at the same time. With the free subscriptions for student high school and college
Yes.
students and everything. It's a cool kind of double-sided approach there.
Right. And on the advertising end, as a nonprofit, you can, for example, we've got these founding collaborators. This is this level that you can join, those are the big donors. Those are the $500,000 people, and they have the opportunity they can spend up to 50% like 49% of what they give can be tax deductible, but they but up to 50% can be used for advertising messages. Now, what the advertising is, for example, the Numerica Credit Union might say, we want to say congratulations to one of the other nonprofits in town for what they've been doing, or we want to, elicit support on that. So these ads won't actually be for the businesses. They will be the businesses sponsoring messages that are community focused. And so they'll have the opportunity to spend part of their money to do that. And so that's where advertising comes in. At most publications, advertising is upward to half the revenue. Under our model, it's around 35%.
Okay.
So it takes pressures off the ad salespeople, and that's something that we think we can work into. One of the really amazing things is one of our big supporters here is on the philanthropic side is Costco, which is never advertised
Yeah,
as a advertiser.
they
Yeah.
famously don't advertise. Yeah.
But on this community focus thing, they're all in on it.
Hmm.
So yeah, and so that's the advertising portion. Of course, on the philanthropic side, we have these events. We have what we call a Northwest Passages Book Club. We bring in authors, and also we use these for community town halls, political debates, things like that. And they're usually held in a theater, the Bing Crosby Theater. Bing Crosby's from Spokane,
Hmm.
and which seats 700 people, and we'll fill that up on a regular basis.
Wow.
So these authors come in and they're used to going to bookstores and having
Right.
20 people, and they come to Spokane and they have 700.
Hmm.
And it's like, so now the conversation is, do you want to end your book tour in Spokane, or do you want to start it in Spokane? And a lot of them are now releasing books in Spokane. And these books are all, the authors we have are people with books that kind of feature the Pacific Northwest and the Inland Northwest and some stage. Well, so people come to this, and when we started this 8 years ago, it was free, but you had to reserve a seat. And we found that a lot of people would reserve a seat and then not show up. And so we started charging these minimal amounts, and it seems like in Spokane, $7 is the kind of key. If you spend $7, you will show up. And so $10 is kind of the deal for these tickets. So they're really, really cheap, and people show up. And at the end of the night, it's not unusual for us to take in $30,000 in contributions. And like I said, it's everybody. One of the Donna Wares, who came over from the LA Times, she was also kind of in semi-retirement, is one of our other managing editors. And both came over in October, but she worked with us at the Orange County Register, and we worked for Rob for years. And she and I got a message that, hey, there's somebody down in the lobby of the review building. And so we went down and wants to talk to somebody. So we went down there, and there's a gentleman who said, I just like to do things in person. And he grabbed his cane and stood up. His older gentleman grabbed his cane, stood up, reached in his back pocket, and pulled out $100 bill and said, I want this to go to saving the newspaper. And we were it was just an amazing thing. Donna and I both have worked in this business for 40 years or more, and we have constantly said we have never seen this. We have never seen this in a community where there's so many people on so many different levels, and people will come up after the Northwest Passages to our table, and they'll say, all I can give is $20, and it's like. And those are the most. Those are the people that really, we kind of get emotional over.
Yeah.
And of course, we have the big donors, but we have these small donors too. And then this past Sunday, for the first time, we ran a page of all our donors at the different levels, and both the businesses and the individuals. And if you'd given us any money and all, your name got in there, and it filled the whole page. And Paul, the type, it was like a sports agate page. It was like the box scores. It was that small, but it filled the whole page. And it was really, when we did it, we didn't realize how much of it, how impactful it would be and how much of an impact it would have. And we were all just stunned. Look at the outpouring of the support. And so it's a wonderful thing. It ran. Rob Curley wrote a column to kind of explain where we are, because we're about 2 weeks before the transition begins in ownership in earnest. And we're about 3 weeks away. We're looking at an April 1st date. But that ran with Rob's column. And then we had another page, a full page. Back in December, we'd invited people to send us why they loved the Spokesman. We ran excerpts with photos and things from what we got from our reader with, why do you like the Spokesman-Review? And I told everybody that works here, when you read this page, have a tissue handy, because it will bring tears to your eyes, because you will see the deep love that this community has for its newspaper. And we got letters from, one guy sent us a letter with a picture, by the way, of him delivering the Spokesman-Review in the 90s and how he grew
Wow.
up. That was his job. And it was just some really wonderful stuff.
That's great. Yeah, I had read that story of the gentleman who had the $100 bill. I don't know if it was on the website or on your LinkedIn or something like that.
Yeah,
And I was like,
we posted it on our
I was
LinkedIn.
like, I'm gonna have to dig that out of him, but I'm glad you shared it because it's a really kind of emblematic story of what you guys are doing there. That's really cool. I had another question before I forget, kind of back to the beginning when you were talking about the model, because I think it could be useful to other people in local media listening. When you said that, back to the school piece, where you said there's a free subscription for students, and that's kind of paid as a gift from the schools to the nonprofit. Is that how you said it kind of worked?
Yes.
My question was, because it could be useful to folks, how did you go about having those conversations with the school districts or the universities to kind of get that set up? Because
So,
I haven't heard that approach before, and I just thought it might be useful for other folks to hear how you
so
did that.
over the course of the past 10 years, Rob has developed a presentation that he likes to give that can last anywhere between 30 minutes and 4 hours. And to the And we also, in addition to the Northwest Passages, we also have had house parties where some of our larger donors will invite all their friends, and we have dinner, we have drinks, kind of a cocktail hour and dinner, and then Rob does his presentation, and that always works. But for the schools, for the businesses, he does one that's a little bit longer and gets into the, you know, how we're really going to work into this and it can get kind of complicated. For example, Whitworth University is one of the top teaching schools in this part of the country. And they are going, so these universities don't have journalism programs per se, but they have journalism classes. And so we're going to take some of those students, but also every university is agreeing to work with us with a specific part of the university. So with Whitworth, it's the teaching, the educators, students who are going to be working with us to create a daily NIE program, the Newspapers and Education. We're bringing that back in spades, but they're going to help us do a daily NIE program for middle schoolers and high schoolers. They're going to help us develop those media literacy programs, and we're also going to work with the educators in the public schools on that. And so what they do is they see that there's a benefit for them out of this, and it's something that's really needed. They all agree that media literacy is a good thing. With Gonzaga, it's their business school, and their business students are going to spend 4 years with what we call allied education, and they're going to get by the time they graduate with their business degree, they're going to say, I spent the last 4 years working at a $20 million a year business.
Mhm.
And then Eastern Washington has a cybersecurity program. They're going to work with us on that and their computer technology. With each of these, we've identified a component and worked with them to identify components that go beyond just them supporting that we're going to work with their students. They're, like I said, they're going to have paid journalism students working with us, and we call it our allied newsroom. So that, and there's a longer answer than that, Paul, that I can get into. That's the answer we have, and that I can do in this short amount of time. It's a real commitment from these institutions that they're going to be partners with the newspaper, and at the end of the day, we save local news, really. If this didn't happen, there was a plan, the next plan, that if we didn't do this nonprofit, that the next steps were to cut the Monday and Tuesday print edition and lay off 8 people from the newsroom. With the support we've gotten from the communities, we're going to be adding people to the newsroom.
That's awesome.
We're going to go from about 50 to 100 people in our newsroom. So, like I said, it's a really exciting time. And in helping people, like you said, helping people with this model, everything that we do, our business plan's in a draft now, but by the end of the year, it'll be finalized. Everything we do is going to be open source and available to people. Everything we do digitally, online, the coding, if people want to dive into that, are going to be, that's going to be available. And everything we publish is going to be available on Creative Commons. So other publications in Washington that are interested in what's going on in the inland Northwest can use our content free of charge, and everything's going to be open. And so people will be able to do that. Our ultimate goal is that comma will become a viable model that could be used across the country. What we're saying now is if we can make it work in Spokane, hopefully we can make it work anywhere. And
Yeah.
so that's our hope, is that this will be something that's bigger than our little town, and that we can help others do the same thing.
That's awesome. That kind of touches on kind of one of my wrap-up questions I have, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I always, kind of talked about your ultimate goal. I always ask people, if you could flash forward 5 years, where to see both yourself and comma slash the Spokesman-Review, like in that time frame. Where would you like to be then? I also, yeah, sorry, I'll stop there. I'd like to hear that answer.
Yeah. Well, on when I was 25, I used to set 5-year goals for
Hmm.
myself, and then about in the early part of this century, when really uh, the newspaper industry hit its financial peak and then fell off, and I've been watching layoffs since. I have tried not to make plans, because who knows? But I'd like to see this be a robust thing. And that comma would take off and, of course, be successful. In 5 years, I expect that we'll have reinstituted the rural newspapers. Also, one thing we're going to do right off the bat is we're going to create an indigenous newspaper
Mm.
for the active tribes who are still very active here. And I've been making some contacts with some people in those communities to try to see how we're going to, pull this together. So, and that the newsroom will be stronger. And one of the deals, Paul, is that we're operating on kind of we like to say it's a teaching hospital model in our newsroom,
Hmm. I like that.
because we have a lot of young reporters, and we expect to hire young reporters. And then we also have veterans like me, and we've got veteran editors. And so when I came in here, Rob told me, he said, your job is within 5 years to make sure none of our reporters can work here anymore, because they will be so good that,
Right.
they'll hire them. And then Rob says his job is to make sure they never want to leave, because we have all these things set up. I mean, for example, Paul, we're gonna have a set up, and it's funded, and it's really gonna happen, that we're gonna have in-house daycare, childcare.
Wow. I have
And so,
4-year-old twin boys, so I feel that strongly. I know what that
yeah,
looks
right.
like.
Right, right, and we have a lot of we have a lot of young reporters, and they're wanting to start families someday, and they're going to be. But they look at this, and it's not like, and we actually pay our reporters pretty well, comparatively speaking to other things. We pay our interns, but we want to make it easier for them. Basically, we've developed this model of going on like, what did we wish our jobs would include, which it always, it'd be, good benefits. And our benefits are now better in comma than they were or they are in the last few weeks of the old ownership. And we are, in 5 years, that'll be fully rolling. And like I said, Rob said his job is to make sure they never want to leave, because you could go work for the Washington Post, but you're not going to get daycare for your kids
Yeah.
there. And or you won't get one of the perks that we have is that at all the universities are going to let our employees uh, attend any class for free as an audit, as long as they keep up with the work and as long as they're serious about it. You can't just come in because they want older people in their classroom with the 19-year-olds
Yeah.
to ask questions and be, responsive and try to get everybody engaged. But yeah, so you could take, so if you wanted to, you could take law class at the Gonzaga Law School for free if you work for us. So that's where we're going, and it's very exciting. And like I said, I really think this one's going to work. And so I think that that's where we'll be in 5 years. Within 5 years, we're going to be able to hopefully roll this out for other communities. In Charlotte, they're already doing Northwest Passages. It's called something else in
Something
Charlotte.
different. Yeah.
They're not in the Northwest, but they're starting to do our events, and our events are community driven, and not for shareholders, because we're a not for profit, and that's another key element in this too. One of the things I wanted to add about our events is we last year, a lot of local elections, and we did some candidate debates where we partnered with the debate teams from the high schools, and they contacted us and said, hey, our debate program would like some experience on political debates, but we can't get any of the candidates to come.
Hmm.
And so we showed up with our lights and sound and
Cool.
everything and told the candidates that the Spokesman-Review is sponsoring the debate. So they all showed up.
Of course. Yeah.
And when they showed up, the people asking the questions were high school debaters, and they asked the questions that were important to them. And part of our goal in all this is to we say we amplify unrepresented voices. And right now, if you ask any of these high school kids, who come in for our internship, do you think your voice is represented in the community? They'll say no. And in fact, if you ask a 38-year-old woman if she's represented in the media, she'll say no. And we say, if you're not an elected official or an 80-year-old man, nobody really knows what you're thinking. So our goal is, with the Black Lens, with the Indigenous newspaper, and of course with the Spokesman-Review, is to make sure that the voices who aren't being represented are represented, because we want them to be a part of our community narrative.
That's awesome. Ron, this is fantastic. I could keep peppering you with questions, I think, but unfortunately, I have another meeting coming up really quickly here, so I'll have to
All
let
right.
you go. But please tell me where people can find you, and comma, and anything I should link to or anything like that.
Well,
Where's
I've got, of course, the LinkedIn page, which is where you found me, but I'm more interested in pointing people to comma, because I think that's what they're more interested in, not necessarily what I'm doing. I also run the social media accounts for comma with some partners. And so comma.cm, now it's not COM, it's CM for community. And so comma.cm is our main website. Of course, you can also look at spokesman.com. And then on a lot of social media like Instagram, if you want to look there, just search for Commas Connect. and it's usually at Commas Connect. If you search for commas, you'll get all sorts of weird things. But Commas Connect is our handle on most things. You can find where we're developing a TikTok page. Books are really big on TikTok, and we've got
Yep.
this Northwest Passages book club. So we're trying to get on Book Talk with some short videos. We haven't done a lot there, so don't judge us. But the main thing would be our website and the comma website, comma.cm, and the Spokesman website. And if anybody wants to get a hold of me, I'm Ron at comma.
Excellent. I'll link to all that stuff so anybody linking can just scroll down and find any of that stuff.
Great.
Ron, thank you so much. This is really cool. Also glad all this stuff's going to be open source and open everything. That's very cool for folks listening that might be interested in some of this. Yeah.
Yeah, Rob's done things over the years where he's come up with some innovative things. The newspaper he worked for said, "Wait a minute, no, you can't give that away. We own that."
Yep.
And usually they told him that after he'd given something away. So he said, "We're not going to have that conflict now. Everything we do is going to be available."
Awesome.
So hopefully that'll help. And our main goal here, Paul, is to save local journalism, and we're just doing it in Spokane. And hopefully, we'll see how it works. But our goal is to be able to develop something that other people can use.
Excellent. Well, I'll do my job of spreading the word here. Ron,
All right.
have a great day. Thank you so much for taking the time. Appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure, Paul.